You know, at times like these, I sometimes feel that our limited intelligence is due to our lack of diction. We don't know what a word means and thus pretend we do by throwing it around alongside other complex terms in order to sound smarter than we actually are. Today, I'd like to talk about 3 words. 2 of these words you might be very familiar with, and the third one is the one I'm willing to waste my time to teach you about. If you haven't clicked off this video yet, then congratulations! You're helping me regain faith in the average attention span of today's generation. What does this have to do with the title of the video? Nothing. It's just a silly central theme I chose to go by to structure this video to pretend that I have some semblance of a smart jackass so that the video gains attention. Alright, let's begin with the word that nobody's ever heard of. Bolivia. What? What do you mean you know that word? You're a fucking liar. Of course you don't know it. Without looking at a map, tell me what's a Bolivia. If you answered a landlocked South American country located at 16 degrees south and at 63 degrees west with a population of about 10 million people, then get the fuck away from this video because you're clearly not the intended audience. Bolivia is a thing, okay? A thing with government and people and politics. So it's already one of the worst things ever. But what does this thing have in common with this thing? Well, it turns out that yours truly here just so happens to be a Bolivian with enough years of Bolivianing to tell you what is actually real and what are lies fabricated by Ubisoft to make reality more interesting than it is. Before you state the obvious, I know that Ubisoft put a warning during the game's startup loading screen claiming that this isn't an accurate representation of the country, but I still think that what they make out of it in fiction says a lot about how they actually think of it. I can already predict that somebody out there is going to correct something I said about Bolivia despite the fact that they are probably miles away from it and weren't, you know, living here their entire life like I have. Moving on to the game, I ran into some problems before I even began, which I gotta say is somewhat impressive considering how games usually have the common courtesy to at least start before making your life impossible. Don't misinterpret that though, because impressive doesn't necessarily mean good. Being the absent-minded Alzheimer's patient that I am, I forgot that this was a Ubisoft game, meaning that Uplay was gonna get shoved up my ass before I could even open it on Steam, which I completely forgot about because my memory is comparable to that of an Alzheimer's patient. I'll be honest with you here, I don't hate Uplay. Hold the firing squads for a second there, I'm not finished yet. I have 0 to no experience with Uplay, so I don't have anything to say about it. I'd rather keep my trap shut than having to make a misinformed, biased opinion that only exists because I followed somebody else's thoughts without any actual experience with it. However, what I do hate about this entire thing is having to make an account on it. I don't have a problem with filling up sheets, being part of a small survey, or authorizing the next nuking of whatever racial minority the highest power in the world wants to eliminate, but I have an issue with wasting time and effort into making an account for a game that I probably won't even enjoy and play for less than 10 hours. I have to think of a username with a specified number of letters that's somehow not offensive or already taken, and a password with similar specifications, as well as having to link it to an email account. And that's just so fucking tedious to do, especially when you know that you probably won't ever use it again. By the time you do come back, you'll forget your password, because of fucking course you will. Then you'll have to go through the process of verifying a new password or make a new account entirely, and you know what? Fuck it. This review is about Bolivia, damn it, not about first world problems, so let's fucking move on. Upon starting the game, there will be 2 cutscenes detailing the plot of the game, and boy oh boy is it as ridiculous as you'd expect. Our opening shot begins with a rejected version of Diablo from Suicide Squad telling us that lying is something immoral in contrast to his edgy ideology of murdering entire generations of people. He begins to tell the story of his life, and it turns out that he's not Bolivian, but Mexican. You know, in case you thought that Mexico would escape the beating that Uncle Sam here seems to be so anxious to deliver in every game and movie they both appear in. He's the head of the Santa Blanca cartel, and apparently, he had a dream.
I have a dream!
His dream is a basic bitch of any drug dealer's dream. To find a place where they could make drugs without American interference. So he finds a place where he could easily do that, Bolivia. Before continuing, I'd like to establish that I won't be giving biased political opinions about my country. Everything I'll say is what I have seen and experienced personally, and if you use whatever I say as a backup for any, and I mean any political opinion you have,
I'm gonna be under your bed the following night.
That being said, the government here loathes the US to the point that the current president Evo Morales said during a speech, and I quote, "Having any relationships with the US embassy is poop." Oh yeah, you heard me right. I said poop. Not shit, poop. Maybe Discount Diablo has a point. He knows that a country with anti-US sentiment like this one is a perfect place for his business, especially since Bolivia has such a huge market for the coca leaf. He bought or took all of the coca fields and got the police, military, the judges, and politicians on his side as well. This isn't surprising, really. I find it hard to believe that Paycheck Zombie Boy had to bribe all of those people into liking his organization because realistically, some of them would have reached out to him. Corruption is hard to measure, but every single corruption index I can find consistently places Bolivia in red zones, and you can take my word for it as well. Even though I don't have a car yet, it's very common having a cop detain you in the middle of the night and charging you for drunk driving. If you try to bribe him, chances are that not only he'll let you go, but also teach you how to make the bribe less noticeable. Again, I haven't done this, but it's a very common thing to see around here. Back to the story, an explosion occurs at the US Embassy, resulting in the injury of 2 Marines and subsequently the capture and death of a DEA agent called Ricky Sandoval through several hours of torture. This causes the Santa Blanca cartel to rise to narco-terrorist organization status and the 4th most dangerous terror group according to the government. The Bolivian government supposedly tries to resist the cartel and form a special forces unit called Unidad, which literally translates to unit or union. Real creative name there, Ubisoft. The government implodes on itself and the new president makes a deal in order to stop all of the killings and makes Bolivia a narco state, and the only way to stop this is by tearing the cartel apart. My only question here is, how the hell did we get a new president? What happened to Evo? Was he killed? I know Ubisoft can't use his face without permission, but seriously? New president? That's never going to happen. This dude has been in the zone since 2006 and is currently a candidate for his 4th consecutive term. The only way that guy's getting out of office is on his coffin right after he dies of old age. Right, so after that I suppose it's time to be introduced to the player character. Ghost Recon Wildlands has character creation, and I believe that there's problems with it. You're given the creative freedom to make your own member of the American team sent in to fix the mess. Sounds great, right? Well, that's if your concept of creative freedom is using a few vaguely military-looking cosmetics that are all too bland to distinguish them from one another. To add insult to injury, a huge chunk of all cosmetics are locked behind a large array of DLC, credit systems, and microtransactions, meaning that in order to unlock that one Assassin's Creed outfit your 12-year-old wants so desperately, you have to be ready to sacrifice $20 to the French gods of pissing everyone off. Besides, it's not like they're a great improvement over the ones you already have, since you'll still look like you're ready to invade a country and strip them from all of their oil as soon as you have the chance. I originally wanted to make my character look as ridiculous as possible, but all of these cosmetics are just too dull and generic for me to make anything substantial out of them. Eventually, I decided to make my character look like a female Unabomber, but then I noticed a gas mask and was immediately sold on it. The less human the better, I figured. Ironically, as soon as the game began, I realized that no amount of customization would make much of a difference anyways, because the delivery would come off more robotic than my character's appearance. Before the game could actually begin, which would have been like an hour after I clicked the Steam Play button, I timed it, we get yet another cutscene. That's where we get our 5 main characters having a conversation with one another about their mission in Bolivia. Who are these characters? Good question. Here's when it becomes painfully obvious that Ubisoft wanted to have bonus points for having character customization while still having a protagonist with a personality. Are those really points you're counting there, Ubisoft? Because when you have both options available at the cost of their individual quality just for the sake of having them, I think you missed the point for why you should have them in the first place. If you can't flesh out your characters, then give the customization all of your attention. If customization is something that you can't fathom, then make your characters feel alive. If you can do both, great. Rub it in front of everybody's face by showing it off. I believe it's possible. If you can do neither, then just go for the anti-chamber approach and insert the player into the game. All of the characters in your squad technically have names and backstories, but they are so bland that I can barely tell them apart even after finishing the game twice. The player character is extremely problematic in that I never even knew what his or her name was. After checking the wiki, it turns out that he goes by Nomad, and rather interestingly, it seems that there is no official bio or name for Nomad if you decide to make her a female, which supports my theory that Ubisoft wants to score diversity points rather than good story and writing points. Their dialogue isn't even different. I checked all of Nomad's quotes after a second playthrough and there is no change at all. All in all, the main cast are like art mannequins. They somewhat resemble a human being and you can dress them up however you want, but deep down they are soulless and made out of wood. Their one personality trait is that they are American soldiers, and the dialogue shows. The squad is being transported by helicopter and you would be forgiven for thinking that it would crash before getting to its destination, but it doesn't. I guess my expectations were subverted because for once in a video game a helicopter in a cutscene fulfilled its purpose, but to say that it's special is just wrong. In fact, it's the bare minimum. You then meet the leader of the rebels against Santa Blanca and Unidad, Pacatari. That's not his name, that's an alias he took based on an indigenous Aymara leader who laid siege on colonial La Paz for 6 months. The first thing he has you do is rescue a guy called Amaru from the cartel, yet another character who named himself after a Native American leader who rebelled against the Spanish. Also, Amaru means snake in the native language of Quechua, so I had a small suspicion of him being a traitor later on. Does it ever lead up to anything? Does translating their names have any purpose? Well, this is an Assassin's Creed, so any potential for mediocre world building goes to shit. So the game finally begins with a pretty good view of the Bolivian mountain range, and I gotta say, what Ubisoft lacks in character development they make up for in scenery design. I've been to places like the Chapare, the Salt Flats, the Train Cemetery, and El Camino de la Muerte, which literally translates to the death row, and they look almost exactly like they do in real life. Even the spot where you first take control of Nomad looks like a place I stopped the car during a trip to throw up. It's actually kinda surprising to see these places I know of finally show up in a game I can play. I'm extremely excited to see the many ways I could annihilate this shithole from existence now! It surely would be easier to figure that out if I could move any faster. Ghost Recon Wildfire is one of the only games I've ever played that runs as fast as the Bolivian bureaucracy. I had a small suspicion that it may have been due to the fact that I use a laptop to record, but it can run GTA 5 with absolutely no performance issues, so it must be a problem within the game itself. If it isn't slowing down because it has too many things going on the screen, then it's closing off because I'm fucking recording. I think this can be fixed by cranking up the resolution, but why does it matter if the better graphics make your game slow enough that the efforts you go through to avoid the recording problems are nullified anyways? I usually don't care about a game's graphics, because unless a game gives you a seizure because of all of its flashing lights, how a game plays is more important than how it looks. However, when the resolution at which you play affects the performance this much with no way to circumvent it, I find it impossible to stay silent. That being said, I realize now that I'm about 4 pages into the script bitching exclusively about things that aren't gameplay, and it doesn't help my credibility as a gameplay critic, but I'd like to cover a game as thoroughly as possible so that I can erase it from my memory after I cover it. Get the hell off of me. So, about the gameplay. There's really not much to it. It's another Ubisoft open world game, but without any of the aspects that make it interesting, varied, or fun. That's where the second word that I wanted to talk about comes in: deceit. Deceit, according to Google, is the action or practice of deceiving someone by concealing or misinterpreting the truth, and it is littered throughout the game. The first instance where it occurs is the second you pay $50 for this game and have immediately been conned. The second time where it happens is during the conception of the game itself. Dismantling a cartel member by member, slowly reaching the higher ranks, is all about progression. Having an open world where you could find said members and their operations is all about exploration. Having missions to help you pinpoint the exact location of each member sounds great because it actually rewards you for doing missions you would normally never care about. Combining the three sounds like one hell of a blast because it exploits every single aspect of what was intended to be the final product. What ends up happening is that the game feels like a chore because of how it was implemented, which might be a metaphor for how these American soldiers see taking out a cartel nowadays, but who am I to know? I'd just be the civilian you'd be penalized for killing in this game if I actually went outside. The way that the story is carried out is through sources of intel that you can find spread throughout the map. Upon picking them up, your map will point out where a mission just unlocked. You can then go over there and do whatever you're supposed to do. It can be either kill X, destroy Y, steal a thing, rescue guy, insert group of people followed by fucked up statement, etc. That's to be expected from this kind of game. Here's the thing though, when you go out on a mission, there aren't many scripted events that can occur. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does a disservice to this game in particular. In an open world game like this one, the chances of you running into a large group of varied enemies in a mansion in the middle of the fucking jungle are very high. When scripted events do happen, it isn't like they can never occur outside of freely roaming throughout the mountains. That makes the impact of whatever build-up any mission could have had null when you more or less know what to expect every single time. This goes on through the entire game, and every encounter feels repetitive after the first 2 major members of the cartel are taken down. Ghost Recon would be excused for all of this if the perfect example of how to implement mechanics like these hadn't been released back in 2005. The majority of the game, you'll be moving throughout one enemy camp to the next, killing every hostile guy you come across, and occasionally capture or kill a significant cartel member. The map is divided into areas, and every area has its own leader who you'll want to take out. Scattered in dumps of intel or hidden away in the rotting, drug-infused brain of a cartel captain is some extra info that can be useful to make your mission easier. If you capture and interrogate the captain, you can force him to spit information about the whereabouts of skill points, supply crates, and weapon and upgrade bonuses for you to find. That's where having such a huge map supposedly helps a game like this one feel alive, but in all honesty, I can't help but feel that it's all padding. It feels as if though these activities were forced into existing in this plane of reality because the large as fuck map would have felt empty otherwise, which it still does because there's no side missions or activities you can do. Speaking of being forced into existence, there's a completely pointless skill and prestige system too. I feel like like Ghost Recon handles its skill system better than other games I've played, mostly because it makes you work for it and the payoff is not a complete necessity for you to win, but it certainly makes your life easier. They're more like passive bonuses than they are skills. It doesn't matter to me because I still feel that this system is in the game just so the developers could claim that they have one. You get skill points by finding medals whose locations are disclosed to you by the aforementioned captains, but to completely obtain this skill you're going to need to give supplies to the rebels too. These supplies come in a few different flavors: gas, comms tools, medical equipment, and food. Each one of these can be found and tagged around the map, but trying to solely rely on them as your only source of skills is like waiting for the Bolivian postal system to be on time, so you're gonna need a faster way to obtain them: convoys. Again, forcing a captain to blabber can yield you the location of some vehicles transporting the supplies you need to upgrade your skills. They can either be in a plane or helicopter waiting for takeoff, or in a truck escorted by a convoy. Unless you've got half a brain cell, you'll want to go for the plane or helicopter due to the minimal resistance you'll encounter in comparison to the convoys. I'd like to use these missions as an excuse to talk about the vehicles in this game now, because it is the only way I can think of to organically transition from one idea to the next. First, there's the ones you'll find the most often: land vehicles. They range from cars to APCs to motorcycles and control somewhat stiff, but they are by far the most stable of the bunch. My only problem is that you can't shoot while driving, which makes attacking other vehicles and convoys in particular tedious, as you'll have to rely on your AI partners or on ramming them, both of which increase your chances of meeting an explosive demise. Actually, scratch that. I just finished playing some more and now I realize that yes, they are somewhat stable, but still a complete fuck up. It's hard to explain, but their control feels floaty and tanky at the same time, making driving extremely uncomfortable. There's boats, which you aren't going to use, and helicopters and planes. Helicopters are the only method of transport that any person without a mental defect would choose due to their easy availability, speed, and ability to land almost anywhere. The only weakness they have are random SAMs that can be found in some cartel outposts, which can detect you and shoot you down from ridiculous distances and would have no business being in the hands of a cartel. Well, that and making the helicopter blades come anywhere near any poles or trees, which will make them break, leaving you crippled and embarrassed looking for another way out, much like a certain professional idiot who's talking right now. Planes, on the other hand, are a completely different story in that they are often only found in airports or tall mountains out of reach, are faster than helicopters but are harder to control and maneuver around in, and are extremely impractical for landing anywhere but on a flat surface or runway. My first time attempting to pilot one of these ended up with a crash landing face first into the ground, somehow not exploding into bits, and a slow but steady drive to the drop-off location. This brings me to the durability of the vehicles, which is also absurd. As I mentioned, I could perform a dive into the ground inside a plane without having it explode into pieces without dying, just like you can be shot out of the air with a rocket, fall thousands of meters to what can appear to be your death in a flaming cabin, only to softly bump into the ground and get out intact. On the other hand, you can also squish yourself ramming your car against a truck trying to make it stop in order to tag the supplies it's carrying. I'm not asking for you to make a realistic or a cartoonish game, Ubisoft, because frankly I don't care as long as it's fun, and you don't either as long as it makes money, but I would appreciate it if you were consistent. It would certainly help me consider my options of how to approach a situation if I knew if my vehicle's durability was equivalent to that of a T-1000 or a tin can. Could you also make it so that you can't be killed after being run over by civilians or by the very rebels that I'm supposed to help? Seriously, I've been flattened hundreds of times by cars going on their merry way to work while I was in the middle of a gunfight because they couldn't be bothered to stop or veer somewhere else, which I suppose is part of the analysis that Ubisoft made about drivers' attitudes in Bolivia. All that was left to do was have a couple of them come out and threaten to beat you senseless for ruining their car. Then there's the gameplay on foot, and like any other bland Ubisoft open world game, it's from a third-person perspective. The only problem you'd really encounter with movement is that you can't jump, only vault over certain obstacles. These obstacles don't account for anything that's a slope without edges, so if you get yourself stuck in a geographical fault that doesn't allow you to walk, then I guess you could as well quit the game or kill yourself because there's no way to get out, which would be the best form of wish fulfillment that this game can offer. Taking out enemy emplacements can be done in two ways: getting in guns blazing asking to be shot, or what can be debatably defined as stealth. Attempting to attack enemies as loud as possible is by far the worst option, because all it boils down to is hiding behind whatever wall just so happens to be close to you at any given time, peek out every so often and shooting enemies until you win. Hiding behind a vehicle isn't a very great idea though, as not only it can explode but also be pushed, and since the game detects any movement a vehicle makes as vehicle motion, you could be downed by a car that wobbled due to a nearby explosion. Stealth, on the other hand, is much more fun and entertaining. That is, until you do it so much that it becomes boring and repetitive just like the rest of the game. You can mark enemies using binoculars, which will make them visible through walls, and you should make the use of cover and crouching to avoid being seen. What really confuses me is why the hell did the developers think it was a good idea painting the general area where an enemy is located on a minimap? If you're supposed to tag them to know their specific location, then why give you a general area where they could be and remove any challenge that could have come from finding the enemy yourself? A simple meter indicating the density of enemy presence in the area that decreases the more you take people out would have been much more balanced. Perhaps the most innovative and interesting concept available for this game is the remote drone that you can use.
Anda, o sea, yo te doy alcance. Yo te doy alcance. Yay.
No se puede saltar un perro.
Oye, espera, ¿qué tan lejos te has ido?
350 metros.
Miércoles.
It's honestly the best thing about this game and the most useful tool at your disposal. It flies around so it isn't restricted to moving on a single plane, it can tag enemies, and you can also modify it to explode or make noises to kill and distract enemies if you decide to spend your skill points upgrading it. Although the drone is extremely useful and the best thing in the game, it also trivializes any challenge that stealth could have had. The drone does have one weakness though, that being enemy jammers that can disable it from fulfilling its game-breaking role. This forces you to stealth like you were meant to, not that it was that difficult to begin with, because you can equip a silencer and basically every shot you take won't be heard by absolutely anyone.
Got another tango.
However, finding and disabling the jammer should make the drone viable again, right? Well, I found out that half the time the signal must be coming from the enemy's stupidity itself, because disabling the jammer still wouldn't let my drone function properly. As if stealth wasn't easy enough, you can mark specific enemies so that your AI partners take them out after a synchronized shot, which is also a consequence-free alternative to the drone. The real problem I have with stealth is how much of a missed opportunity it is. With a gadget like the drone at your disposal, you'd expect that there'd be more ways to use it or exploit its effectiveness, but the most you get out of it is recording an Argentine politician during a kinky session with a prostitute for a few seconds. Another feature that's completely pointless is hiding in the trunk of certain vehicles. I suppose this could be used to hide and wait for enemies to move, but that's never something practical that would happen in this game. The most use I've seen from it is when you need to transport a number of passengers that exceeds the seating capacity of a car. There was this mission where I had to follow this guy who got on a car and drove a small distance away, and after failing once, I had the brilliant idea to hide in his trunk without him noticing and having him drive me to wherever he went. That would have been amazing, and a genius idea if the developers had any clue of how clever stealthing works. But no, the dude just got on another car and left me disappointed, bitter, and looking like a dumbass hiding in the trunk of the wrong car. Another situation that comes to mind when discussing missed opportunities is when there was this boat out on a lake that had to be taken care of. My idea was sneaking up to it by slowly swimming to the edge and getting in unnoticed, taking out everybody as quietly as possible. What ended up happening was that I was suspected of being there the minute I approached the boat, and the second I got discovered, I was shot and downed on the ledge, where my AI teammates left me to die because they couldn't seem to understand how to lift themselves onto the ledge. This would have been the perfect opportunity to implement takedowns to kill enemies stealthily while disposing of their bodies at the same time. Ubisoft, however, keeps forgetting how basic human logic would work because this is an extremely complicated stealth game that is so convoluted that it seems to forget how simple some problems are to solve. It's not like they haven't done it in the past in one of the most critically acclaimed video games they have ever released and whose franchise they continue to milk to this very day. The solution is right fucking there. Not only within the territory encompassing your house, but framed in your own fucking trophy wall. I know that it's from another franchise and that you're afraid of combining concepts, but come on, this couldn't have been any more obvious. You can't even move enemies' bodies after they die. How do you overlook this simple ability that any adult US soldier is very clearly capable of? All of the amusement that I got out of this one situation was killing everyone on board, using the boat as a sniper nest since none of the enemies could swim to me, and having one of my AR partners deciding to follow the footsteps of Jesus and Eminem and walk in water, using the boat itself as cover. This was hilarious, but it also highlights how much of a messy game this is, technically speaking. There's plenty more bugs and glitches that the game has to offer, and those are some of the only sources of genuine fun that you can get. One that particularly strikes out from the rest, at least during my playthrough of the game, happened during a cutscene. I I was daydreaming about how the Ghost Squad had gotten its name, and the cutscene proved to me that it may have been partially due to this one instance where my character literally ghosted out of existence, possibly also explaining why most of the enemies are sometimes completely unaware of your evident presence. Remember how I said that stealthing was easy? Well, that's when it's completely optional, because when it's mandatory it can be extremely unfair at times. There's this one mission where you have to infiltrate a complex unnoticed and find some documents within and use a truck to sneak in and out. That doesn't seem too hard until you have to maneuver around a garage with about 5 guards patrolling the objective every 5 seconds. This part is one of the most frustrating parts of the game simply because of how inconvenient it is. First of all, every time you fail, you have to go back to hijacking the truck to get in. That's fairly understandable until you find out that you'll be failing a lot. Even if you don't want to do the mission, if the complex goes on alert while the mission is active, a game over screen will show up to interrupt whatever you were doing and send you back to hijacking the truck. Inside the complex itself, there's narrow corners through which guards can surprise you through every single time. If a guard is alerted and you enter combat, regardless if you kill him without him firing a shot, the mission fails. With about 5 of them patrolling the place, there's no room to fuck up. Once you find the intel, you have to photograph it, and you can still be detected while doing so. There's even windows specifically placed there so that you can easily be seen by the guards that are patrolling on the other side. Not even after taking the picture do you get a break, because you still need to exfiltrate unnoticed. Fail now, and all of your efforts will go to waste. Back to the truck it is for you, motherfucker. As a general rule of thumb for stealthing in general, you better hope to whatever higher being you believe in that an enemy car doesn't stroll down the street while you're trying to infiltrate an enemy camp, because if he sees you and fires one damn bullet at you, you're done. That should be the time that you'll notice that the combat is pretty flawed too. Although you can choose from many weapons and varying amounts of customizable options and stats, you are the same vulnerable, squishy middle schooler from start to finish. Peeking your head out for a second can see you being shredded with bullets and down instantly, even after having upgraded all possible health and regen stats. Going down in this game is pretty much like entering a life-threatening depression. Everything will go black and white, you'll just lie there like the useless sack of shit you are without the ability to move, and you can't do anything until someone else comes to pick you up. All joking aside, it leaves the player feeling useless and punished for even trying to retaliate to any enemy fire. You can't move, see, or even shoot to try to be helpful to your team, and it's just too fucking long to sit through. By the time that anybody picks you up, all enemies in the area will be dead, the world will already have cold fusion as its primary energy source, and Half-Life 3 will be out and outdated at that point, making you feel even more useless and bored because you missed out on all the action. If the timer on that health bar runs out, you die. If you get picked up, you get a second chance. Lose this second chance, you're done. It can be upgraded to 3, but who cares? At this point you want that depression to just fucking kill you. Some missions will require you to interact with some items, enemies who will try to escape or have a time limit. You'd of course want to deal with them as quick as possible, right? No, you wouldn't, because that implies that you'd want to play this in the first place. If you hypothetically did want to do it though, that would require you to get out of cover and run towards the objective as fast as possible. If you don't, you're usually fucked. However, getting out of cover is also going to kill you, with the added bonus of you having to lay on the ground waiting for your AI buddies to pick you up, wasting even more time. Even once you're interacting with the objective, you or your target can still be shot and killed on sight. This has to be one of the most contradicting combat systems I've ever seen, specifically designed to make the player lose regardless of which situation they're trying to approach. It's almost as if the game has an identity crisis in that it doesn't know what it wants to do with its stealth and combat. It doesn't know whether it wants to be slow and tactical or fast-paced and violent. It ends up doing both to try to satisfy both of your needs, but makes it inconvenient for the player in all possible situations. Inconveniences seem to be a bit of a running gag here at Ghost Recon Bolivia Edition because everything seems to be working against you in some way. There's no better way to explain it than when you're sent on a mission to capture El Muro, Tattoo Parlor Galore's right-hand man, whose existence is also extremely ironic considering that he's a Mexican whose name translates to the wall. Of course, since this is a specific mission I wanted to talk about, the game screwed up my recording and fucked me over, and since I don't exactly have the time or patience to go back and redo it, you'll have to take my word for it. El Muro is located in a Unidad base and attempts to flee in an APC once you get near him. I managed to get him into a car during my first attempt, and it was all well and good until the car turned upside down and got stuck in a rock. This wouldn't be the first time that it's happened, but what sets this apart from the other times that it did is that El Muro couldn't give more of a fuck about his own life and refused to get out of the car. I tried shooting the car to force him out, which worked, and got him to climb on top of it, but the problem was that now he wouldn't move off the car, which was already on fire and subsequently exploded, kill him, and fail the mission. The second time he got shot while I was trying to extract him, which is the fairest way to fail the mission, I guess. It was then that I decided that driving him out of the base was the best way to waste another 5 minutes of my life and opted to flee in a helicopter instead. At first it worked like a charm until it was eventually shot out of the sky by a SAM. There's no indication that it's there unless you tag it, which begs the question. How am I supposed to do this without turning my table into the surface of a moon after a meteor shower? Am I supposed to take it seriously and slowly only for my target to escape while I do the military tiptoe tactics? Am I supposed to run in and pray that I don't get shot by the couple hundred enemies peppered around the area? I managed to beat this on the 4th try. Not because I attempted a different strategy to exfilling by car or made sure to destroy all anti-air defenses, but because I got lucky and the enemy AI decided to lower its IQ by a couple of digits. Speaking of enemies, they have 2 different factions and both of them drive me completely insane. The first and the one almost omnipresent during the entirety of the game is the Sicarios of the Santa Blanca cartel. I hate them because they are living, breathing stereotypes of the Latino gangster. I'm not offended by it, no. As a matter of fact, I'm fucking bored and annoyed of it. I mean, look at them. They all look the general same and are done to death in every single way possible. I get that Mexican people use lots of the same insults and general mannerisms of speech, but after hearing the words culero, chingado, and wey for the 5 billionth time in the game, in movies, and even in real life, I'm starting to go fucking mental. This phrase in particular is going to give me Mexican cartel PTSD because of how often it is used. Unidad, on the other hand, is a much less annoying presentation of Latino enemies. Their HQ commander sounds like a genuine Bolivian police officer, they aren't Mexican, aren't cartel, and are by no means a stereotype. They look properly dressed for paramilitary units, have tough vehicles, and their bases are much more complex than anything the cartel could ever throw at you. It's kind of a shame that you'll want to avoid entering in combat with them because they are some of the toughest sons of bitches in the game who are among the few enemies able to down your AI teammates. In addition to that, they can also call in patrols to hunt you and your squad down, and the more patrols you take out, the more of them will come in after you, similar to how the wanted level in GTA works, but not as hard, fun, or fair. Something I find particularly odd about this game is how unfun and tedious the main game is in comparison to some of the Easter eggs found around the map. Some of them are missions that you can do, while others are simple interactive puzzles. Others seem to be worshipping and jerking off to better properties that this game could aspire to be like, but falls just short of it due to mediocre execution. I think that teaming up on a mission with Sam Fisher had a lot of potential to show off the stealth capabilities this game has to offer, if we stopped sucking Splinter Cell's dick and had made a balanced stealth system to begin with. Same thing goes for Rainbow Six, but removing the word stealth and filling the blank in with loud combat. I also distinctly remember walking into a jungle, finding an injured woman telling me that there was a monster nearby who'd skin everyone who dared come across it and send me to investigate. Imagine my surprise when I saw a huge spaceship crash into the mud and later on the Predator itself as a completely optional boss fight. Sure, I sort of predicted it based on how subtly Ubisoft was marketing this Easter egg, but it was still an enjoyable experience nonetheless. I mean, the monster didn't turn out to be Willie Nelson screaming juice, but we can all dream, right? Although I found the fight with the Predator somewhat frustrating due to its ability to down you with one shot and thermal vision not detecting it while it's invisible, the whole thing was still fair due to the fact that there's only one. Despite having a somewhat predictable pattern of attacks and not being important to the plot at all, the Predator boss fight is shockingly competent in comparison to the rest of open season Wildlands. When a limited time Easter egg is more fun and well executed than the rest of the game itself, you know that you've done something wrong. I also heard rumors about a Yeti that could be found in this game, as if Yetis were some sort of Easter egg staple, and surely enough, after searching it for myself, it exists. The thing with this Yeti is that he's a sniper located on a snowy mountain who'll begin attacking you as soon as you interact with a bloody rock near a river. Cool idea with an interesting spin. I'm actually surprised it wasn't disappointing. The final interesting hidden secret is the inclusion of a Bolivian mythical creature known as El Tío de la Mina. The process to finding El Tío is complicated, so I won't be going over it, but what I like about this is that it gives more insight into Bolivia's culture than most of what the rest of the game tries to do. If you remember the song La 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 by Naughty Boy, El Tío is the figure in the cave who the two men leave the boy to at the end. To put it simply, El Tío is a god from the underworld who watches over the well-being of the miners in Bolivia. It's a tradition here for miners to leave him offerings of coca, tobacco, and other sorts of goods in exchange for his protection while working underground. If you neglect to do so or disrespect him in any way, it is said that you'll suffer a painful death. I'm sure that Ubisoft wants all their players to fall victims of a slow and painful death because they dressed some random asshole as the underworld god, gave him the moniker El Tío, and killing him unlocks some cosmetics and weapons. Thanks for the slow and painful death, Ubisoft! Finally, there's the last tediously monotone stretch of what's left to cover in this game, the cartel leaders you're supposed to take down and wrapping up the rest of the story. I'll be completely honest with you here, I found almost none of these leaders to be very engaging. There's a couple of them that are interesting and different from the rest, but they are few and far between and barely noticeable to make much of a tangible difference. They can generally fall into one of three categories: complete maniac who's thirsty for your blood, working for the cartel in hopes of doing good but traveling down the wrong path, and being forced to work with the cartel or otherwise be killed. Of all the leaders, I can only remember three that stood out, and walking 7-foot 2-inch canvas is by far the least interesting. El Emisario, or the Emissary for short, is an example of a boss with a forgettable personality but memorable fate. He's hidden in the highest room in a mansion, and you have to go up about 5 flights of stairs to capture him. When you finally get to him, you'll find out that he's fulfilling my daydreams after realizing that being captured meant failing his grandfather, who, mind you, is the head of the cartel's cocaine production department. El Cerebro, or the Brain, on the other hand, is one of the only enemies in this game who displays actual intelligence. After disrupting his whole cocaine smuggling submarine operation, you're sent to capture him, and after taking the guy in for questioning, he reveals that he isn't El Cerebro. Turns out that the guy you caught was just his lead submarine designer, and that the real Cerebro had already fled Bolivia with no way of being traced. I love this because not only did he just play the ghosts and the lead squadron of soldiers who are as smart as they are stealthy and deadly, but he also manages to get away with it while making them look like fucking idiots. They don't even care about him afterwards, they just let him go and he's never heard from again. Finally, we come to what's possibly the most interesting and original character the game has to offer, El Pozolero. El Pozolero, or the stew maker, was a man who worked in construction until he lost his job due to the failing Mexican economy. He was then hired by Santa Blanca to fulfill the body disposal role by pulling a Breaking Bad and dissolving corpses in acid and dumping them where they could never be found. The cartel sicarios are disturbed by him, as are your teammates and mission debriefer. You can find several audio recordings of people detailing his line of work, further cementing his status of a terrifying monster with no feelings. There's even a song you can find that was written about him detailing the whole thing. Everything leading up to that point is built up on fear and a burning sensation of uneasiness, which makes the mission focus on capturing him intense. When you open up the building where he works on, you'll be instantly reminded of the freezer part in Half-Life due to the cold ambience, raw human beef lying around on the ground, chainsaws with fresh blood on them, and barrels with implied melted people inside them. Take a hold of El Pozolero, however, and you'll find out that he's pretty mild-mannered for somebody who does that job. When you begin transporting him to HQ, you'll find out the reason why he is the correct man for this kind of job.
If we're staying overnight, I should probably have me also.
Your bear? Like a teddy bear?
Oh, it's not what you think. I'm not overly afraid of the dark, but Pepito will think I'm cheating on him. Nidia Flores once gave me a jirafa azul, and Pepito said the nastiest things to him. I had to spank him. Pepito, that is, not the giraffe.
El Pozolero's mind is severely underdeveloped to the point that he behaves like a very kind child. He has no sense of right or wrong and isn't afraid of chopping people up and dissolving them simply because he cannot comprehend the concept of death and has never actually harmed any living person. He even asks you to take him back, not because he wants to get paid or avoid death, but because he's afraid that his teddy bear will miss him if he's gone for too long. The fact that the lyrics to the song about him state that he does this to feed his mother, coupled with the childish drawings he makes and his complete obliviousness to what his actions mean to others, suggests that the poor guy is being unknowingly manipulated and being taken advantage of by the cartel. It doesn't help that he's treated like shit by your mission debriefer and squad once he's captured, since in the end he doesn't know any better. Although it's hard for me to feel empathy for other people, much less fictional video game characters, you can clearly see that Ubisoft was trying to pull some emotional strings here and there with El Pozolero. It just amazes me how truly incompetent you have to be to put so much dedication and interesting information into one character whose existence is acknowledged for less than a few minutes, in contrast to the main antagonist of the entire game who everyone never shuts up about. El Sueño, the main villain of the game and the subject of ridicule in this review by my part, is a true middle finger directly to the player's face. Although that's usually the point of most main villains in order to make putting a bullet in their smug face all the more satisfying, El Sueño is not that kind of middle finger at all. For starters, his name translates to the Dream, which reflects his goal of becoming the drug overlord to beat all drug overlords. The main problem I have with him is his role in this story. He starts it and he ends it on his own terms, but not in any way that would have him come near the ankles of, say, Handsome Jack for example. Ironic, considering his quite monstrous 7'2" height. He shares similarities with Jack and other omnipresent villains such as Wallace Breen and plays a similar role in that everyone fears him but his empire falls at the hands of the player. Unlike Jack, he isn't as charismatic or devilishly mischievous, and unlike Breen, he isn't leading a threat anywhere near the level of danger that the Combine was. He's just some pretentious asshole who would have gotten away with running his own country hadn't it been for the explosion that occurred at the US Embassy. An explosion which was actually triggered by DEA agent Sandoval himself in order to trick the US into intervening because not even they would have given a fuck about El Sueño otherwise. Despite being established as the ruthless bastard he is, you never actually get to fight him in the final mission of the game, or even witness any of his cruel deeds. You only get to fight his defenses, which have all the problems of loud combat I detailed earlier, but not the man himself. This isn't helped by the fact that the rebels, who were basically useless before the ghosts came around and you spent the entire game helping them rebuild their army, turn on you with the excuse of liberating their country without outside interference. Pa Katari turns out to be the real douchebag during the whole ordeal as he not only kills Amaro for differing with his views, but it also gets himself decapitated by Sueño once he decides to go at it on his own. What was the fucking point of this? I know. Bolivians are deeply resented towards the US for several reasons that I couldn't be fucked to research about, and they would sure as hell receive a huge ego boost for taking out this obnoxious prick themselves, but this has to be a really stupid move to take. What's especially insulting about this is the fact that I've been wasting my time picking up supplies for the rebels the entire game, making them grow and be more powerful as time went on. That's conceptually at least because they barely have any presence in the area outside from the ones that you deliberately call in. Am I supposed to feel affected by this? Every time that I naturally encountered them, they were a pain in the ass, immediately engaging the cartel while I was stealthing and giving away my position. Besides, this was a poor in-universe decision as well because it is established that without the ghosts, these idiots wouldn't be capable of surviving for more than a few minutes. I've spent more time opening cages in which they were held captive than I've spent fighting alongside them, which is part of the reason that I was excited to finally be able to blow their damn brains out after the final mission would be over. Unfortunately, this only occurs at the very last mission only, with the rebels going back to being your allies again afterwards. Back to Sueño, depending on how much you destabilize the cartel, you get one of two possible endings, which are both equally disappointing and empty. In both of them, you confront him only to find out that he's got full immunity and that you're supposed to take him into hiding. If you clear the cartel entirely, which is considered the good ending, your debriefer Karen Bowman complies and takes him into hiding. If you didn't trash the cartel at 100%, then Karen would rather just shoot him and get taken to prison herself. I should also mention that regardless of how destabilized the cartel is, you'll always get the bad ending first, and will have to play the mission again to unlock the good one. Why? Do you really need to extend the amount of time that people are gonna play this? I mean, it would make sense for this to happen if you didn't have a 100% after completing the final mission and then the game gave you a message telling you to do it again afterwards. I've already done the entire thing, why can't I just jump to the good ending? With how much of a fuck you the bad ending is, I wouldn't be surprised if half the people who got there decided not to be bothered with the good ending and quit right then and there. This ending also has Sueño get away with everything. He gets a luxurious apartment in Miami in exchange for giving info on many other terror and narco groups and should eventually be sent to prison, the which Bowman suspects he'll escape from to create another organization. Not only is this hinting that Ubisoft will make another game to drain more of your money, but it is also extremely unsatisfying. You could maybe excuse Ubisoft by saying that they took the realistic approach, but it doesn't matter to me. They could have at least made the cutscenes where Sueño is captured or killed playable, giving the player some sort of control over the entire ordeal. Besides, I feel like I would have been more engaged in Sueño's fate if anything I had done previously had any impact over the outcome, or God forbid, leaving it to me and not some NPC whose job is to be a dick for half the time to capture the son of a bitch. So that's Ghost Recon Wildlands for you, except that it isn't. Believe it or not, despite having covered that large amount of meaningless patented bullshit, that is just what comes in the base game. There's two main areas in the map who lack a cartel boss because those are DLC exclusives. Oh yeah, this game took that approach, the one that wants you to drain more money from your wallet without letting you go. To be fair, there's plenty of content in the base game that keeps me from calling it incomplete without DLC, and that's something that I have to commend Ubisoft for. Making a game that feels complete without the need of having to pay extra cash in order to unlock everything is something respectable nowadays, and I find this product to be complete without add-ons. Still, what I feel should be toned down is the price tags on all Ghost Recon Wildlands related items. The game alone costs $50, which I got for about $11 during a sale, and even then I feel like I was being too generous. I mean, check those Steam prices and tell me if the content you're getting is worth what's displayed on the screen. Oh yeah, and there's also microtransactions too if you thought that they had some sense of self-respect left inside of them. Although I've heard that the two campaign DLCs are way more different and more fun than the base campaign and worth the money in some people's eyes, I'm already tired and waiting to be euthanized from playing this, so I won't touch them. I wish I had the strength to, because I'd like what these two add-ons seem to be offering, but I know that if I do, I'd probably crack my skull open from hitting myself in the head due to the frustration I'd go through. Despite everything I've said, I really hope to see an improvement in the sequel if it ever happens. You see, the reason that I ever played this to begin with is because I was told that it was a good game unlike anything I've ever seen before. Those were obviously blatant lies and opinions made by someone with extremely low expectations, but believe it or not, this isn't that bad of a game. Okay, let me rephrase that. This is a horrible game, but honestly not to an offensive degree. It isn't as boring and pointless as No Man's Sky, as hyped and exaggerated as Fortnite, or much of an insulting cash grabs as modern EA games. Don't get me wrong, it still has all of those aspects, just not to the point that it's unsalvageable. Ghost Recon Wildlands can be fun with friends and has a few moments where it can be something more than just another bland open world game. It can be innovative, and most importantly, it can be fun.
¿Dónde estoy? Here I am, dude. No.
I can see it being better, and a part of me hopes that someday someone designing a game like this one sees this video and takes the points I've made into consideration to make experiences as enjoyable to make as they could be to play. That's a very small percentage of me though, because the other huge part of me is just too angry at all the wasted potential to care. Lastly, the final word to conclude this review is bleak, which is used to describe something desolate, depressing, and without hope. That would be the word I would use to describe the future. You see, I'm not the only one who's pissed off with Ghost Recon Wildlands, and in fact the Bolivian government itself is probably more than I am for the wrong reasons. Well, I couldn't give any less of a shit about the setting of the game. The Bolivian government took it as an offense and misrepresentation of the country as a whole, and have taken legal action. Minister Carlos Romero, whose bulging eyes are a common target for mockery around these parts, filed a complaint to the French embassy complaining about Bolivia's portrayal in the game as a country run by drug lords and demanded that they take action against Ubisoft. While it would be amazing to see Ubisoft get shot out of the sky by this complaint, I feel like this is an issue that's way deeper than it initially seems. First of all, I don't think that there should be that much of an issue with how the country is portrayed, because more than half of all the problems in the game are due to a Mexican cartel messing everything up, and the Bolivian government itself is presented relatively benevolently and willing to take action against the cartel. The game could have still been based on Bolivian landscapes and have bits of its culture without being Bolivia itself, and still retain the core setting of the game in order to not stir up any trouble. It wouldn't change the fact that the game itself is shit, but I'm just trying to solve the problems that incompetence creates. On the other hand, Bolivia has the right to be annoyed all they want, but they should at least recognize that this is a work of fiction, and an extremely ridiculous one at that. With the history of coca leaf growth in the country and their expulsion of US aid regardless of what reasons they had to do so, they shouldn't expect to get out of the "this country is 100% drugs" zone either. Look, if you should take anything out of my ignorance in this last paragraph, is that there are better ways to solve the issue, and maybe even recognize that there is no issue going on here at all. After more than a year on hold, the complaint hasn't gone anywhere, and I doubt that it'll ever do, but it should serve as an example of how making issues out of non-issues leads nowhere. If this last thing about the lawsuit didn't make much sense, just look at it as me trying to give my honest opinion on something that isn't as simple or concrete as a game and failing miserably to get a reasonable point across. I'm just tired, okay? I doubt I'll ever touch Wildlands again. I have better things to do, like studying for a statistics class, improving my unstable relationships with my friends, or failing another suicide attempt. Besides, even if I did come back ever again, I'm almost certain that I walk away with even bigger headaches and a more blistered hand due to the amount of times I'd slam it against my desk. Attempting to attack enemies. Fuck. I skipped a paragraph. This has to be one of the most contradicting combat sisters. Combat sisters? What am I reviewing? Fucking people now? Their HQ commander sounds like a genuine Bolivia. Why the fuck are you doing this? Like this huge YouTube video that's about an hour long. You have a huge ass test tomorrow. You're not studying. You're not planning your life ahead. You aren't doing anything useful with your life. You're just sitting here monologuing, pretending to do something important. Warming up for recording this stupid video. But it's not good. What are you doing with your life? Something I find particularly odd about this. Jesus fucking Christ! Dad, no! Fuck no, I'm not gonna answer you. I don't care if you're drunk at 3 a.m. in the morning. Jesus Christ! Ah! Fuck. Well, that's gonna stay in for the bloopers. As I mentioned, I could perform a dive into the ground inside a plane without having it explode into pieces, without dying, just looking at you. You gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. I've been stuck here for the last 2 hours trying to get that sentence correctly, and I cannot do it. I don't know why I cannot fucking do it. I know how to speak English correctly. I speak it better than Spanish. Just concentrate already, can you? You know how to do this. You wrote this. Why can you not do this? Why? Why can you not do this? Ah! Fuck! Oh, fuck. You gotta be kidding. You gotta be fucking kidding me. The thing is still recording. Of course the thing is still fucking recording. God. I wanna kill myself. Just kill me already. God. Well, So the game finally begins with a... God damn it. Alright. Fuck you. What do you want? If we rebrand crime as... Fuck. Fuck you, it's still recording. God damn it, that made it into the bloopers. Fuck.